Hello, I am Brita Wallace with Wallace Family Ministry. I'm a family and parent educator. Welcome to my channel. We are going on a journey of doing the Love Dare together. I'm also doing a Love Dare for parents, so check that out if you didn't already know. Make sure you get your books so you can follow along and do all of the amazing answer the questions so you can look back and see how far you've come once you complete the dares and how your family is responding to them. So today is day 3 of the Love Dare, which is really for marriages, but if you're not married or you're single, you can get creative with it and choose to just love people in taking these concepts. This study and the Love Dare for parents literally teaches us the true meaning of what it is to love, what that means, what that looks like, and how we do that efficiently and appropriately so that our children, so that our spouses, so the people in our life are feeling unconditionally loved and accepted and valued, and a bunch of other things that go along with helping to create their identity. So especially for children, I should say, really is, when we're displaying that love. But even with our spouses, I think too, we can go in an identity crisis if we're not being loved right. I think that that's probably still an accurate statement. I'm not sure about like other relationships, like friendships and stuff like that, but definitely within the 4 walls of your home. And that's what Wallace Family Ministry is all about, is teaching within the 4 walls of your home. So we are going to start with a verse. So be devoted to one another in brotherly love, give preference to one another in honor. And that's Romans 12:10. So I have the verse written up here. I'm not sure that you guys can see my little board back here. Great. Maybe we could zoom and you could get the notes that way. I have to figure out a better system perhaps. Not sure I'm going to do it soon. So day 3, love is not selfish, Romans 12:10. And we are just going to get into some reading here. So, selfishness and love are not in constant opposition to one another. While love asks us to deny ourselves for the sake of someone else, selfishness compels us to focus on ourselves at their expense. Selfishness is like a disease that suffocates our capacity to love. So, both of those statements I have written down here. So selfishness and love are in opposition to one another. Love asks us to deny ourselves for the sake of others. Selfishness compels us to focus on ourselves at their expense. Okay, so that's really, really important that we realize that that's really what selfishness means. And that it's in opposition to love. That's really important too, is that when we're being selfish, we're not being loving, right? So selfishness is like a disease that suffocates our capacity to love. So when we're being selfish, it's almost impossible for us to love others appropriately. So when we choose self-centeredness, we become higher maintenance, more needy, more overly sensitive, demanding, and then we don't get our way. And when we don't get our way, we judge others harshly while being blind to our own faults. So I've been guilty of that. I'm sure all of us has at some time or another, right? So you're going to hear some things, statements, and they might come up for you where I deserve, I want, I expect. These are just some phrases where that could maybe come up where maybe I'm being selfish if we're saying these things a lot, right? So the culture that we live in contributes to this, because we live in a now culture. It's everything is now. I mean, even with our children, the sad thing about childhood right now is that so many kids are literally, and my child has a tablet, he uses a tablet, we use it for certain times of the day. I'm really strict about the tablet in the sense where it's a little different in the winter, but I still want games to be being played. You need to go play by yourself and or your sibling and use your imagination. But these days, our children are losing their imaginations because they literally have something to do at their fingertips at all times. So that's something that we can, change in that sense, is helping our kids to have to wait, to have to practice patience, to have to put others first, and teaching them these things so that they don't gain this sense of entitlement and selfishness that we see so often in our society today. So regrettably, these selfish tendencies are ingrained into every person from birth. So we all have them. We all have this selfishness where we want it to be about us. And honestly, when we're really, really small, like, I don't remember the age exactly, but 2, 3, we're literally thinking of ourselves all the time and how things affect us. So that's just the stage of development that we are at in those, early years. So, you can see it in this way with young children and how they act, and often in the ways that adults use and mistreat one another. So young children, they act very selfishly, tantrums, they want to get their way, they're not getting their way, they're going to throw a tantrum, they're going to try to throw the tantrum to get their way. So, and then, adults often, in a lot of cases, aren't always the kindest to each other, especially in families. We feel like that's our safe place sometimes, so that's where we just let things come out, and we don't watch what we say sometimes, so we're not always being kind. Sometimes in relationships we can be selfish. I think that probably ebbs and flows, especially if we're not being intentional about not being selfish, right? And putting somebody else before ourselves. So marriage exposes our selfishness in living color. And that is something that I wish I wrote down, but I do really like that statement. I think it's very simple, and it's like, it really does expose our selfishness. So when when a husband puts his interests, desires, and priorities ahead of his wife, he's flying a flag of his own selfishness. When a wife constantly complains about the time and energy she spends meeting the needs of her husband, she's revealing selfishness. So the next thing that I have written down is, always every sinful or wrong act stems from a selfish motive. So, think about that. Write that down. Think about it. That's one of our key points today, is that every selfish, think about somebody murdering somebody. Well, why did they do that? It was a selfish act. It was to gain whatever it was they were trying to gain from that person, right? It was totally about that other person. So, committing the crime, and just fill in the blank with any crime or any, wrongful or sinful act. And you're going to see a very, very selfish act is what that's going to look like, right? So what does selfish look like? We have some words written down here. So talking too much, boasting, never listening, not listening enough. We have to practice active listening with our spouses, with our kids, within our families. It's really important. When people don't feel listened to and they don't feel heard, they start to internalize and they shut down. So we want to make sure that that's not happening within our families. We want to create a safe place for open communication and loving open communication and acceptance, and a place where everybody in the family, even our children, feel valued, right? So it can look like irresponsibility, complaining, moodiness, laziness, bragging, being easily angered, okay? So those are just some things that selfishness looks like, and the list could go on and on and on, right? So you either make decisions out of love for others or love for yourself, okay? So, but love does not seek its own, 1 Corinthians 13:5. It beautifully finds its satisfaction in the welfare of others. Loving couples and loving marriages are bent on humbling themselves and taking good care of the other flawed human with whom they have chosen to share their lives. They understand that by getting married, they are giving themselves away and releasing the right to live the rest of their lives for themselves. It's putting the happiness of their partner before their own. So, by prioritizing the well-being of your mate, you experience a fulfillment that cannot be duplicated by selfish acts. Because what happens is when we're loving that way, when we're choosing to love that way, that's very much reciprocated. And again, almost every day we talk about how that might not be immediate. We have to stick with it, especially because I don't know what relationships are like at home for you. So if there's this tension and bitterness and deep roots of things that are just, hurt and trauma in a marriage or whatever it may be, it might take longer for your spouse to respond. They might not trust these nice things that you're doing for them, and they might need time to say, okay, well, they're really actively trying to, love me well, and they're practicing that, and I'm gonna start responding to this. But they might be weary at first. They might not respond to it, and that doesn't mean that you give up. That means that you have to push harder, and sometimes we have to prove ourselves and earn trust back. And doing the work is righting the wrong. It's reconciling the relationship. So that's a really good thing, and it will be fruitful if you stick with it, but not if you quit. Then that just might just dredge some stuff up, I think, right? So unselfish people are a perpetual delight. Don't you want to be a perpetual delight? I want to be a perpetual delight. I'm sure I'm not all the time, but that is a fun, like when you hear that, for me, I'm just like, wow, I would really love if somebody referred to me as that, because that's a really great compliment. I think it's nice to hear that and want to strive for that, right? So they are willing to set their own jealousy and demands aside and lose themselves in the joy of loving, serving, and giving to another. The more you learn to resist your own selfishness daily, the stronger, more lovable, and happier you will become. So nobody knows you as well as your spouse, and that means no one will be quicker to recognize a change when you deliberately start sacrificing your wants and wishes to make sure his or her needs are met. They may welcome it with warmth or silently be suspicious, but they will notice. If you find this day's challenge hard to swallow and are frustrated with the ideas of sacrificing your own desires to benefit your spouse, then you may have a deeper problem with selfishness than you would like to admit. But as we have discussed before, admitting things and owning up to what's going on with us and really owning that and being able to say, well, why? This is an issue for me. This is something that I'm struggling with. And then being able to say, okay, why? What comes up? How, what is the environment? What's the situation? What is it that I really am truly wanting? Or, how am I being selfish? And being able to recognize that and then being able to work through that. So the first step is really just acknowledging that there is maybe some sort of a deeper issue that we need to work out with ourselves, right? And that's hard sometimes, but when we don't admit those things, we live with a whole bunch of negative feelings about that. When I was going through my healing journey and really struggled with anger, that was like pouring out of me from all this bitterness and deep roots and all this stuff from my childhood, and that was just, it was crazy. It was like borderline crazy, and on different levels, on different days, sometimes, but it was deep hurt, right? And I had to admit that was happening. It wasn't enough, and I didn't at first, and I kept it a secret, and it kept me in bondage to it. It kept me in bondage to it because I didn't want to be judged if I sought out the help of somebody else, but I didn't even have to. I ended up meeting with somebody to pray with them. We were gonna be prayer warriors. And she told me this story of her life, and I started to cry because it was the story of my life, and because she had just randomly told me that out of nowhere. Like, that's how our time together that day started. And it was a mirror. She was an older version of me, and it was a mirror, and she was telling me about her childhood and how it made her angry because she suppressed it for so many years. And then when she wanted to deal with it, all this anger was pouring out. I mean, it was like exactly what I had gone through in life, but I was younger, or my children were younger, so we were in a different stage. I don't know if I was younger than, the age she was at the time her children were small, but so I didn't want to be a closed off mom, and I also didn't want to be a mom that was broken because I had so many things that I suppressed for so long. So I had to admit them and realize that, hey, I think both of those things are pretty selfish acts. When we have children that we need to raise, and we are instructed to bring up, and take care of and love and cherish. And when we have things that we need to work on within ourselves, and we don't want to admit them, it can be very selfish. I think for me, it was coming from a place of shame. I didn't want to be judged, and but if I didn't do anything with it, if I knew that something was going on and I just continued to hide behind it, then I would be in bondage, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, and I wouldn't be a good mom, because I would be struggling, and I would not be getting the help that I needed to be the mom that I needed to be to my boys, right? So it's important that we admit those things. So ask yourself these questions. Do I truly want what's best for my husband or wife? Do I want them to feel loved by me? Do they believe I have their best interest in mind? Do they see me as looking out for myself first, or them first? So this says, remember, your partner also has the challenge of learning to love a selfish person, but don't wait on them to earn your love. Determine to be the first to demonstrate real love to them with your eyes wide open. Show them what it looks like to be your unexpected example, or to lead by what it looks like by your unexpected example, And when all is said and done, you'll both be more fulfilled. And then Philippians 2:3 says, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. All right, so we are to the dare. So are you guys ready for the dare? This might be a tough one, they said, right? So whatever you put your time, energy, and money into will become more important to you. It's hard to care for something you're not investing in, right? So along with refraining from any negative comments, buy your spouse something that says, I was thinking about you today, all right? And that really, if we think about it, should be somewhat easy, but it's not always easy, or like, I don't want to buy them something or whatever, but it's a nice gesture. It's going to make them smile. It's going to, you don't know what kind of day or how that could change their day and affect them inside, even if they're not showing it on the outside, even if they're skeptical. But that's going to make them feel good. I mean, when I bring Chris home gummy bears or gummy worms from this store that I go to when I go shopping, he's like giddy, like a child. He gets like so super excited about it. And I get them for him for that purpose. Yes, because he likes them, but I like to see his reaction when he gets them. He goes into a childlike state, and that's a state we should all visit more often. So that is it for today. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you will subscribe to my channel, that you will like it, and you will share me with your friends, especially if you think that somebody you know could benefit from these dares or this challenge, or even just today's challenge. I love you guys. God bless. Take care.